Hey there folks, this is GreenXI welcoming you right back to Let's Play Higurashi. This is episode 163. In the last episode we kicked off a brand new arc, which was the festival accompanying arc, where we got to see a little bit of Miyo's past, her childhood, where she was sort of traumatized in a really bad orphanage, and that's, you know, to give us a bit of empathy for, I guess, the villain of the series that was revealed in the last arc. So whether that worked or not, it's up to you, but I really like her as a villain either way. She's amazingly horrible. Let's get going. Chapter 2. This time we'll just make it to the midway point, because last time we went for the whole chapter, right? Banquet to back end. Over. One more speaker, then the toast starts. You ready? This is the back end. We're ready. We can't hear anything from inside, so please give us a clue when the speech is wrapping up. Cue. Listen up, 10 bottles of beer per table. Make sure to deliver them to your area smoothly. Young hotel workers dressed smartly in bow ties pulled bottle after bottle out of the beer cases, preparing for the toast. They waited for their cue to serve the drinks while listening through the intercom. At a normal party, they could put bottles of beer on the table ahead of time, but if there was a lecture before the party, then they couldn't. Guests don't mind sushi going dry due to a long speech, but they don't like seeing their tables get wet with condensation from the bottles of beer. And more than anything, they certainly don't want to drink warm beer. That's why beer has to be served right before a toast. However, there's always a speech before a toast, and usually a long one. Especially at a big party like this, there are lots of guests that give speeches, so it's extremely difficult to know when to serve. For that reason, the bottles end up sitting outside by the banquet room, and people end up drinking warm beer anyway. They know it's coming, it's going to be warm. There were several dozen tables with white tablecloths on them in the banquet room. Approximately 8 people were sitting at each table, so there were at least a few hundred people in the room. The banquet room was filled with excitement. There were many plates with many different kinds of food on each table. A sushi platter, a sashimi platter, a fruits platter. Also along the wall, there were cooks ready to serve fresh sashimi. I don't know what sashimi is. All the guests appeared to be well-mannered gentlemen, and clearly were notable people in various different fields. The huge and beautiful chandelier above them clearly indicated that this hotel held a status good enough for these famous people. An elderly gentleman was given a lengthy speech on the stage before making a toast. Usually people don't like such long speeches, especially if it's before a toast. But the guests occasionally shouted, "Yes, yes," and sometimes gave him loud applause, filling the room with their fervour. Well, maybe fervour was a pleasant way to put it. It was probably more accurate to say their excitement was bizarre. Which country would actually teach people not to show respect towards their own flag? There are no others. It's happening only in Japan. That's right, that's right. Is forcing people to respect their national flag and anthem an obstruction of their freedom? That's a foolish idea. Listen, love for one's national flag and anthem comes naturally to all. To know ourselves, to know our culture, to understand our history and our country itself. Those are the things that make you realize that you're a Japanese citizen, that make you understand the part you play as a citizen of this country. And the feeling you get from that is love towards your own country. However, those anti-Japan teachers are proclaiming that it's militaristic brainwashing. Those stupid claims are wrong. What are those people doing anyway? They're teaching our children to hate being Japanese. They're the ones brainwashing them with this self-destructive education. They are teaching our children that Japan should be ashamed of itself, and that they should be ashamed of being Japanese. Forget who you are, and deny your country. That's what they're teaching them. These innocent children listen and believe such nonsense. Of course they do. They go to school to learn things, right? If their teachers teach them that, of course their children will believe it. Can you believe such corruption exists? We must do something about this country's education now, no matter what it takes. The sound of applause filled the banquet room. All the gentlemen agreed and expressed that they felt the same way by cheering him on. After that, a gentleman wearing a cloth sash approached the stage. The hall welcomed him onto the stage with another round of thunderous applause. A rousing theme from a popular drama series played as he took the stage, but it was entirely unnecessary before the overwhelming applause. The man's sash carried his name written in large letters, along with the name of the prefecture he was running for office in. Let me introduce to you a patriot, XXXX Kun. This man has served the former governor as his right-hand man as director of the office of the governor for many years, supporting the prefecture's government for a long time. Since the previous governor has decided to retire, he was appointed as the next governor. Unfortunately, we have those anti-Japan teachers in our prefecture. While they proclaim freedom of education and freedom of thought, they shamelessly forcing an anti-Japan education down on our children. They don't teach real history, they teach our children that everything was Japan's fault. They don't even mention the true purpose of the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, or all those who fought to save Asian people from Western control. I've never heard of that term. I had a bit of a problem there. They don't even talk about how many Asian countries were actually Western colonies before Japan stood up for our freedom during the war. Our country has recovered amazingly since then, yet our children don't know any of that because those teachers don't teach them. How truly, truly sad. I can't stand the fact that those anti-Japan teachers are actually teaching our children alongside those teachers who take teaching seriously. They're insulting our educational institutions. I'll become a governor and get rid of those teachers. I'll straighten out our education system and make sure our children will grow up to be a decent young people who can carry on Japan's future. He, XXXX-kun, announces his candidacy for the next year's prefectural governorship. We appreciate your support for him. I promise I'll straighten out Japan's education system. Thank you for your support. Again, the banquet room filled with applause. The man was receiving a standing ovation. I need to explain a bit about this banquet before you misunderstand. It wasn't the conference of a political association or lecture by a political candidate. That's what I thought it was. It was hard to believe, but this was nothing more than a meeting of a college's alumni association. Everyone should be familiar with what those are, whether it's elementary school, junior high school, or college. Once you graduate from one of those, you normally belong to an organisation of alumni. You receive invitations for your reunions, where you enjoy talking about the good old days. However, there are many different types of such organisations. Some are simple, some are united with much tighter bonds. And once an organisation becomes united with those tight bonds, it's no longer a simple organisation of alumni. Rather, it becomes a significant faction known as an alma mater clique. In Japanese society, it's traditional for graduates to form tighter bonds that go beyond the level of an organisation. Also, the more superior the alma mater, the stronger that tendency holds true. The Imperial University, one of the best universities in the country, is famous for the deep bonds its graduates form. Why do superior people like to bond? Maybe because they take pride in being superior. But more than that, maintaining connections is the most significant reason. All Imperial University graduates are elites in their respective fields. They're likely to succeed and become important people. When they do, the unity of their alumni association gains immeasurable meaning. In fact, even today, the Imperial University graduates maintain their tight academic clique, and they hold great influence throughout many different fields. They interact with other universities as well, so the graduates' bonds are extremely tight even today. Additionally, while Imperial University usually refers to the University of Tokyo, sometimes it's used to meet all 7 major universities in Japan. They're located in Tokyo, Kyoto, Tohoku, Kyushu, Hokkaido, Osaka, and Nagoya. They're all great schools. I wonder which ones I butchered there. There happens to be an organisation of alumni that includes all of those 7 universities. The elderly gentlemen in this banquet room were each from one of those organisations. However, not every graduate will get an invitation here automatically. It is a society of select gentlemen, and in order to become a member, one must first fulfill several conditions, such as recommendation from an existing member, contribution to the society, possession of status, and so forth. Sounds like a gentleman's club over here. Therefore, all the members are important people from different fields, and obviously the power of this organisation is of a political nature. But there's one more very important criterion one has to meet to join. Strong patriotism, a heart that longs to contribute to Japan in its rebirth, as we just saw from their hatred of teachers who don't teach pro-Japan. As a result, this organisation has become extremely nationalistic. Up on the stage, the candidate for the prefectural governorship was still talking passionately. I'll get there. And among those elderly gentlemen in the crowd, Takano can be found. Takano seemed used to this kind of conference, and seemed unsurprised at anything that was said, but at the same time she looked rather fed up with it. As she was in attendance, she must have been one of their members, which meant she possessed not only an extremely excellent academic background, but that the older gentleman here had acknowledged her equivalent contributions to society, that she possessed strong patriotism. However, her academic background was the only qualification she had met to join. She was only able to join as a special case because of her connections. She didn't even hold prejudiced ideas like the other members did. So why was she here today? probably because of the same reason as the man giving a speech up on stage. The man on the stage didn't actually have prejudiced ideas, much like Takano. He only prepared a speech that he knew the guests would like. Politicians only want votes. Each and every person has a vote, but appealing to each one of them takes too long. So the most efficient way is to appeal to organisations with a unified idea and a unified will. In other words, this man was given this speech so he can garner support from those powerful people. The elderly gentlemen in the banquet room will then do their best to support him, since he appears to share their ideals. They can offer many different kinds of expediency, support and assistance. To an outrageous degree, I might add. If the day's event continued in the same way, the organisation would likely decide to officially support him. They'll probably give him a great deal of financial aid. They'll assist him in different ways as well. Of course, the man on stage won't be the only one gaining something. When he wins the election and becomes a governor next year, the organisation will welcome the governor as a new member and gain even more political influence. And eventually, the organisation will become so powerful that nobody can ignore it. Those of you reading this right now probably get the sense that they're no mere alumni association. You'd be absolutely right. After reaching this level, they were a fine syndicate. No, they would be a secret society if the group wasn't so open about its activities. Now I'm sure some of you readers are brushing this off thinking there's no way such a suspicious organisation could exist in Japan. But everything I've explained is entirely true. There are several such influential groups and organisations within our society, and you need to understand that they hold powerful political clout and influence our national policies. Some are alma mater cliques like the one I've described above. Others are scientific societies serving different parties, industrial groups, advisory committees, religious organisations, community service groups, and so forth. Also, there are right wings and left wings, the hawk and the dove. I won't go listing their specific names here. Yet you've probably read them every now and then in your average newspaper. In Japan, the terms for such forces aren't very common. Most of you readers probably think of suspicious organisation wearing white hoods when you hear the phrase secret society and laugh it off, the Freemasons and all that. But unfortunately, that's a huge mistake. In America, when there's far more territory and citizens, there's way more groups like that. And they possess such vast influence that ignoring them is impossible. So the terms they use for such forces doesn't apply to those on the scale of this syndicate. Sometimes people say that such groups have more power than the White House, and they are referred to as the shadow government. Even here in Japan, we had a shadow government before the war, our Zaibatsu. After we lost the war, the GHQ dismantled those blocks, but 40 years have passed since then. There's no guarantee our country hasn't given birth to another shadow government, given how good we are at collusion, groundwork, and backroom deals. Miyo Takano was, in fact, attending a conference of such a shadow government. Oh, we're going back to Hinamizawa. It might appear to be a guest house at a huge golf course. There were no golfers in sight, but by appearances, that must be it. But appearances can be deceiving. This wasn't a golf course, but a huge backyard. The guest house was, in fact, a very stylish mansion. Normal people would be surprised to learn that this was a private residence. Maybe it's not Hinamizawa then, maybe it's just a reused sort of photo. The interior of the building was as lavish as the exterior. There were beautiful carpets on every floor, expensive looking decorations on the wall, and expensive looking bottles of alcohol on the shelves, of course. That's the kind of room Takano could be seen in. There was a knock at the door, and an old man in a wheelchair and a young woman pushing it entered. As Takano stood up to bow, the old man stopped her by raising his right hand. No, you don't need to stand up. Long time no see. I've been telling you to come see me any time, but you never do. It's great to see you, Koizumi-sensei. The old man sat down on the sofa with assistance from the woman. He was very old. His face was covered in wrinkles, and he could hardly do anything on his own. Even so, he still held a great deal of power and influence. Oh my, you haven't changed a bit, have you? I can see lipstick on your neck. Oh, is that right? Good grief, how embarrassing. There was no lipstick on his neck. The woman who was helping him with his wheelchair was too beautiful to be a mere helper, so Takano had suspected something. As it turned out, her guess was correct. Although he was so old that he could die the next day, he wanted to stay sexually active until the very end. Even the Grim Reaper would think that's just absurd. Miyo-chan, you've become quite beautiful yourself. You're not a little girl anymore, eh? Oh, stop. If you really think that way, why did you try to touch my bottom, Ha! What have you got to lose from having an old guy like me touch your butt? I'm sure you have plenty of chances to touch a softer butt, don't you? Perverted old man. Takano and the old man enjoyed a tasteless conversation. They'd clearly known each other a long time and were very close. The young woman came back in to serve tea. After she left, the old man started to speak. Anyway, I'm so proud of you, Miyo-chan. I'm sure your grandfather in heaven is proud of you too. I hope so. But I'm not even close to approaching the level of my grandfather's great work. Takano-kun was unlucky in many different ways. The era he lived in. If he lived in a different era, I'm sure he would have finished his research. But he lived in that era, and ironically, that was why he noticed the existence of the Hinazawa syndrome. The world today is in the nuclear era, with America and the Soviet Union glaring at each other over mounds of nuclear stockpiles. It takes nukes to have authority as a major power. Yet we've forever abandoned our nukes thanks to our 3 anti-nuclear principles. In this age we are now a nation without nukes. How deplorable. In the middle of the 20th century, despite rising tensions between East and West, there was a temporary peace known as the Cold War, brought by a balance of nukes pointed at one another. Permanent memberships in the United Nations were monopolized by nations with nuclear arms. They secured their predominance with nukes, bound the world with nuclear non-proliferation treaties, that's a big word, eternally banning non-nuclear nations from the world stage. For Japan to become a nation that can compete with the world, it must develop nuclear arms, or something as powerful. That's what some people believed, at least. Realistically, Japan will never arm itself with nuclear weapons. I know, the citizens wouldn't accept it. Even if the government ignored their opinions and armed itself with nuclear weapons, it wouldn't work. By abandoning nuclear weaponry, Japan gained the deterrent power of the United States. Though some people thought the only way for Japan to become equal to the United States would be to get nuclear arms of their own. But realistically, that was impossible. Even if Japan armed itself with nuclear weapons, that wouldn't automatically let Japan join the great powers. Takano and the old man discussed the balance of nuclear power in the world. Eventually, the sound of the cuckoo clock reminded them to return to the main subject at hand. The old man pointed to the attache case that had been sitting next to Takano. Takano nodded once, opened it up, removed the contents. There were brand new bills packed in it. How much was actually in there? A bundle of brand new million-yen bills is 1 centimeter, so there must have been at least enough to make up 8 digits. There were also 2 more attache cases by her side. However, neither Takano nor the old man were surprised at all. Takano closed the attache case and bowed. Thank you very much, Kurozumi-sensei. I'll never forget about this. Money should be handled by younger people. I can't take it to heaven with me. I just hope this will be of assistance to you. Use it wisely. Of course I will. I'll use this money only to make my grandfather's dream come true. I envy Takano-kun. What a wonderful grandchild he has. I'm sure he's bragging about you up there. I haven't done anything yet. I'll have earned his praise when I complete my grandfather's work. I'm so jealous. My boys are no good. They're only interested in making money. What really matters is how the money is spent. How you contribute to the country is what's most important. That's how you repay your debt to it, you know? Oh, so you're saying that treating all those lovers so lavishly is also a way of repaying a country? Of course. When they shop, the country makes money. Money goes round, you see. However, those lovers would probably end up buying some foreign goods. Things probably don't work quite the way this old man thinks they do. Takano chuckled to herself. But the money I give to those women and the money I give you are completely different. I know that very well. You've worked very hard. You've retained trust and support from so many people. This is the first time I've mentioned it, but Huruyama-kun and Mochizuki-kun both weren't sure about you because of your age at first. That's why I'm acknowledging your efforts, and that's why I'm giving you this money. I understand. Also, for me to give you this money means that I recognize you as the official successor of Takano-kun's research. Thank you very much. Thank you for believing in me. I truly appreciate it. No, don't mention it. This research is Takano-kun's and yours too. You wouldn't want anyone else to take over. So, thanks to all of your effort, I didn't have to spend too much time convincing the other old folks. Complete my grandfather's research is the least I can do for him. I won't begrudge any efforts towards that aim. Takano smiled as she remembered everything she had to go through to get to this point. It went without saying, but the old men around Takano saw her as someone from their grandchildren's generation, or maybe even younger. Just how much trouble did Takano have to endure in order to gain the trust of those with such a large generation gap? It was hard to describe to those who couldn't even imagine her trouble, but Takano earned it. She gathered allies, drove away enemies, garnered support, and forced them to recognize her. She spent a long time establishing trust and rising to a status that the old men would welcome. which was all the more reason this meeting was a reward for her many days of hardship. Now that she officially had a powerful influence backing her, she could spread her wings and see the completion of her grandfather's unfinished research. Well, now that you're officially continuing Takano-kun's research, there's something I need to tell you, Miyo-chan. What is it? I'm listening. The old man paused and pulled an expensive cigarette from the cigarette holder on the table. Takano lit it up for him. She didn't smoke herself, but knowing that the old man did, she kept the lighter in her pocket. The constant build-up of little gestures like that were how she gained the trust she held today. Takano-kun noticed the Hinamazawa syndrome in Manchuria, not Japan. Manchuria? There we go. Yes, according to my grandfather's journal, around Shuwa 15, he learned that many soldiers sent from Hinamazawa to the Kwantung army expressed terminal symptoms, which led him to surmise that an unknown infectious parasite dwelt in Hinamazawa. Under the harsh conditions of war, people sometimes lost their minds. In those conditions, those who were sent to a far-off battlefield from Hinamazawa spent their days under duress, and occasionally they exhibited terminal symptoms, hallucinated, caused twisted incidents. Yet that all occurred in the extensive chaos of the battlefield. Every incident was handled separately, and no one suspected there was an underlying cause. At the time, Takano-kun was working as a military physician in the Kwantung army. He was researching the prevention of different infectious diseases, and one day he noticed that several incidents of deranged behaviour were occurring among soldiers from the same hometown. He hypothesized that these symptoms were unique to those from Hinamazawa and began his own personal research. He hired soldiers from Hinamazawa as workers in his research center and studied them there. Then he learned of the unique Hinamazawa faith in Oyashiro-sama, and he was convinced that he found an infectious parasite with unique properties. Some may wonder how he could be so certain that these symptoms were caused by unusual parasites. At the beginning of the 20th century, German doctors proved that some unknown diseases were caused by bacteria and parasites. At the time, it wasn't too far of a jump to assume that unknown pathogens could be behind unknown diseases. For instance, in modern times it's been revealed that beriberi is caused by vitamin B1 deficiency. But at the start of the 20th century, many loudly proclaimed that it was the work of an unidentified pathogen. Yes, my grandfather predicted that this research would be valuable to the army, so he asked for a budget, but they just laughed at him. As a researcher, her grandfather was very talented and passionate, but when it came to gaining the aid of political powers, he simply stuck out. Hinamazawa syndrome? No, the possible existence of a parasite that infected the human brain and controlled emotions. Even though he made the remarkable achievement of discovering a mystery no one had explained before him, he was unable to convince others of that achievement, and spent his life alone, unable to garner support and unable to achieve proper recognition for his achievement. Independent research has its limit. Talented people, funding, backup. A research project can be successful only if all those things are present. Takano had noticed her grandfather's mistakes, and that was why she did everything she could to obtain all of that. The military at the time was hoping for a low-cost, immediate acting weapon. While Takano-kun's research was extremely intriguing, it didn't meet the military's expectations. But I heard you were the only one who understood my grandfather's research, weren't you? In his journal he calls you his best friend. We came from the same hometown. It was a miracle to run into someone from the same town on such a distant battlefield. Although we weren't close in age, we became very good friends. So we talked a lot. Many times he told me his research would be revolutionary and asked me to lay the groundwork to secure funding for full-scale research. I read in his journal that he talked to many different people about his research. Unfortunately, its value was never recognized, but I'm sure your support meant a lot to him. But I was never able to really do anything for him. That's why I want to help you, Miyo-chan. Helping you is like atoning for my mistakes. Thank you very much. He was lucky to have you as his best friend. If only there were more understanding people like you in the military's upper echelon. It's very regrettable to think that my grandfather's life might have been different. The old man closed his eyes and paused for a moment. Shortly after that he looked into the distance and spoke. Actually, that isn't true at all. The higher-ups were interested in Takano-kun's discovery. What? I've never heard that before. Then why didn't they support his research? Something came up, and they couldn't let him look into Hinamazawa syndrome. Only a few of the top brass and myself knew the reason. Now that all but myself have passed, I think I should tell you, Miyo-chan, since you're carrying on his work. What came up? What was it? Takano had believed until this day that her grandfather's research was ridiculed by everyone, which was the reason why it had never gained any recognition. Her grandfather had asked the military for funding so he could uncover the secrets of Hinamazawa syndrome during the war. But just like the old man had said earlier, the military wanted an instant acting weapon. That was why they weren't interested in his research. That's what she had believed. But as it turned out, the military had actually shown an interest after all. Before I go on, I need to explain about the Kwantung Army in Manchuria at the time. While the Kwantung Army was stationed in Manchuria, opinions were divided on whether to advance our forces north or south. At the time, Japan had troops in Manchuria, but opinions were divided on advancing north to deter the Soviet Union or advancing south to expand our territory and secure resources. With the Soviet Union and its predecessor, Russia, being a landlocked, frozen nation, they had long yearned for an ice-free port that wouldn't freeze over in winter. They'd made numerous attempts to expand their territory southward too. Those expansionist policies were said to be a cause of the Russo-Japanese War. Russo? In the history books, it said that Japan won the Russo-Japanese War, but it was actually a draw ending in peace signed at the Treaty of Portsmouth. Both sides had simply set aside their spears after mutually exhausting their forces. It wasn't like Russia capitulated and offered a complete surrender. As a result, the perception of the Russian threat continued to smoulder. Later, the Russian Empire was overthrown by a revolution, but Japan was unable to shake the threat that the new Soviet Union would advance south. According to the history books, Japan went south. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and abandoned the northern advance. As a result, when the Great Patriotic War began, the Soviet Union was able to respond to pressure on the German front by pouring in their eastern forces. Though the Germans had managed to lay siege to Moscow, the Soviets launched a massive counter-offensive to reverse the tides of war. Even with the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, the Soviets couldn't tell if Japan would attack them at some point. Because of that threat, the Soviets had to leave some forces in the Far East, and they weren't able to devote enough troops to the German front. For starters, the Soviets had forged the Germany-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact too. Yet Germany broke the treaty and attacked the Soviet Union. To make matters worse, Japan and Germany had forged a military alliance. Ooh. With all those factors in play, the Soviets naturally couldn't trust Japan to uphold their Neutrality Pact. Ironically, the Soviet Union was the one who broke the pact, but I won't go into that now. Exactly, Hitler signed the Tripartite Pact because he expected Japan to keep the Soviets' other front in check. But ultimately, Japan abandoned the north. With the superior German offensive, many supported the idea of waiting and watching it play out. They believed that even if we did advance north, it would be after Germany conquered Moscow. However, that plan was exposed to Sorge, and the Soviets transferred their heavy tanks from their far east border to the German front. That secured Germany's defeat at Moscow, and the Germans began seeing a string of defeats, starting with the Battle of Kursk. It was a turning point in history, huh? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was recognized as a global power, but at least in Showa 15, the Kwantung Army didn't think it was a particular threat. Japan had earned a victory with the Russo-Japanese War, and they took the new Soviet Union government lightly, assuming it wouldn't be stable after overthrowing the Russian Empire. That underestimation was corrected after the Nomonhan incident in Showa 16. After several fierce short-term battles with the Soviet Union's advanced mechanized corps that led to great losses, the Kwantung Army realized they shouldn't fight the Soviets, and that inclined Japan toward the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact. But at the very least, up until the Nomonhan incident, the Kwantung Army was strongly conscious of the Soviets and divided on advancing north or south. Thanks to that, there were also voices advising caution, suggesting we all avoid all-out war with China in order to shore up our forces against the Soviets. But the Sino-Japanese War broke out after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, right? July, Showa 12. The Japanese and Chinese armies were staring at each other across the Lugao Bridge in Beijing. It was the middle of the night on July 7th. The Chinese army fired on the Japanese army in training and engaged in combat. This triggered the long Sino-Japanese War. Yes, according to historical records, that incident triggered the Sino-Japanese War, but with opinions divided over advancing north or south, the army was equally divided over a full-scale confrontation with China. No, in fact, we even received orders from General Staff Headquarters to resolve the matter quietly before the incident grew much bigger. So those supporting the northern advance wanted to settle the Battle of Lugao Bridge quietly, insisting that that conflict with China was pointless in light of their anti-Soviet strategy. However, those on the mainland supporting the southern advance used this incident as cause to dispatch more troops to China. They enacted hard policies against China, and thus the Marco Polo Bridge incident became the trigger for Japan and China to enter all-out war. After that, and their bitter struggles in the Nomonhan incident, Japan greatly revised their Soviet strategy. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and secured the route for their southern advance. The Sino-Japanese War got worse and worse. If the Marco Polo Bridge incident hadn't happened, it's possible that history would have gone very differently. Maybe we would have ended up in a war with them anyway. However, if the South faction didn't get that chance, the military authorities would have kept restraining the Soviet Union, and the Soviets would have had to divide their forces between East and West. And maybe Germany could have invaded Moscow. Then Japan could have gone to Siberia. The map could have been very different today. Germany wouldn't necessarily have won the war if it had succeeded in taking Moscow. England was keeping its strength on the other side of Dover Strait, after all, and the United States were poised to enter the conflict. Besides, Napoleon once occupied Moscow, but in the end he couldn't beat their winter and had to withdraw. It's one of those ifs, huh? The Axis might have won the war. Yeah, it's possible that the gunshot from the Marco Polo Bridge incident changed the tide of history. Both sides had different opinions of who fired the shot, right? According to the Japanese side, a Chinese soldier fired a shot at a Japanese soldier who got too close to the Chinese camp. However, the Chinese side claimed the shot was a conspiracy invented by the Japanese military. Of course they're going to say opposing things, aren't they? But the shot was fired. Even though nobody knew who actually pulled the trigger, it sparked the Sino-Japanese War. Yes, that's what the history books say. But, Koizumi-sensei, what's that have to do with my grandfather? In the Marco Polo Bridge incident, a shot was fired at a unit that was training in the middle of the night. Everyone was summoned for a roll call. They were missing one soldier. This soldier came back later and he said that he was sent as a messenger and got too close to the Chinese camp. By the way, did you know that soldier was from Hinamazawa? Eh? Really? When Takano-kun was talking about Hinamazawa syndrome, he said that soldiers from Hinamazawa could suddenly fall into a deranged state. And we realised that the soldier from the Marco Polo Bridge incident was in fact from Hinamazawa. Then what about the first shot fired? I don't know the truth, but I think it's a possibility that a soldier within the terminal stage of Hinamazawa syndrome fired the shot. That soldier was killed in the incident. Since there was no record of it, nobody knows exactly how he died. The Japanese side claimed that the Chinese army had fired at them, negotiated with that in mind. Just a scant few days after the incident, Japan demanded an apology from the Chinese and as a show of force dispatched 3 divisions of reinforcements. The Chinese side was, of course, opposed to that. The situation escalated at once. If research into Hinamazawa syndrome continued, the higher-ups thought it would negatively influence the Japanese army's claims. So in order to avoid the risk of traversing that political grey zone, they rejected Takano-kun's research. So because of that, they refused to even consider my grandfather's research long after the war ended too. Yeah, that's exactly it. The war's over now, but there are still some conflicts there regarding historical recognition. Even if Takano-kun didn't mean for it to happen, if his research into Hinamazawa syndrome became public, it might cause a resurgence of quarrels over the long-ended war. Certain authorities were afraid of that, so they made sure his research was ignored even after the war. I was long warned not to aid him in any way myself. Takano tried to remain calm, but she couldn't stop herself from grimacing. She just found out the real reason why her grandfather's research had been ignored. It was because of secret maneuvers by political masterminds. If those masterminds feared it so much, ironically, that meant they acknowledged the importance of his research. Takano was saddened and frustrated to no end by her grandfather's lonely life. However, they were all dead now. I'm the only one who knows about this. If Takano-kun was still alive, I was going to apologise to him and give him my unconditional support. But he's no longer around. That's why I'm apologising to you and offering to give you my full support instead. You sure? Wouldn't research into the Hinamazawa syndrome dredge up those same subjects again? It's different now. Besides, research into the Hinamazawa syndrome may produce more than a mere local disease. Depending on your research, post-war Japan may gain a trump card that makes it a world power once more. So the tides and times have changed then. That's right. Unfortunately, Takano-kun didn't live long enough to see the tide change. But he has you to continue his research. So as long as I'm alive, I'll give him my full support. I promised to help Takano-kun, but because of various things I couldn't do anything. So I want to make up for that as long as I'm alive. I think that's the least I can do for the man who called me his best friend. Koizumi-sensei, Thank you so much. Oh, don't mention it. Glad I was able to tell you everything before I died. Anyway, till I'm gone, I'll make sure you get everything you need, okay? So if anything comes up, be sure to let me know. I'll do anything for you. Takano couldn't even imagine what kind of bond this old man and her grandfather had between them. But thanks to that bond, Takano was able to gain a powerful supporter. Tears welled up in Takano's eyes as she gave him an emotional look, but in her mind, she was practically dancing at the promise of the old man's full support. The old man and Takano both bowed at the same time to show each other their appreciation. Once that was done, the old man became a little more serious. After that far too lengthy preamble, he finally said what he really wanted to tell her. So there you have it. This is what I wanted to say. The Hinamazawa syndrome has the potential power to make history. It may even twist the fate of our country. So keep that in mind and be careful with your research. Ooh, getting darker. That was a long speech, or talk. After the proprietor finished serving the food, she bowed and left. The room was very tastefully put together, reminding them of a tea ceremony room. While it was spacely decorated, quite a bit of money had obviously gone into it. This was a very famous Japanese restaurant, where many high-up officials and other important people held secret meetings. Takano was there, accompanied by about 5 gentlemen. She was sitting slightly further away from the men. They were clearly in a much more important position than she was. One of the men, wearing an expensive double-breasted suit, told Takano not to be so nervous. Please relax, Takano-san. What we read is very interesting to us. I can't believe this research was just sitting there for dozens of years. It is surprising. I thought most of the research on BC weapons that Japanese military conducted during the war failed to bear fruit, and nothing was left after US military confiscated even the fundamental research. I heard this research was barely even glanced at by the top brass. I see. So that's why nobody knew about it and GHQ didn't investigate it. In that sense, at least, it was truly fortunate. Interesting that Dr. Takano's research would be succeeded by a different Takano-san. I suppose that's fate. It's like the deceased is using your body to complete his life's work. Maybe that's true. I feel a mysterious connection to him too. Takano adored Takano Hifumi and called him grandfather, but she hadn't revealed that relationship to others. She realized it wouldn't be beneficial for people to think she was involved in personal feelings in her continuing Dr. Takano's research. So publicly, she once had exchanges with Takano Hifumi, and after his death discovered his research documents with his remains, and chose to carry it on. At least that's how the story went. Well then, what do you think? The defense agency was very interested. According to Nakagawa-kun, the defense agency's Technical Research and Development Institute showed great interest. They offered to sponsor the research too. That's wonderful. Congratulations, Takano-san. Thank you very much. Here's what they said. There's a research council for next generation deterrence being led by experts from several different ministries. One of those is called the Alphabet Project. Have you heard of it, Takano-san? There was no way she would know about something like that. It was very possible for these nationalists to research something dangerous without citizens knowing about it. Society forms something like a web made of connections between people. People hold hands with other people who share the same ideas and end up knitting a net. Of course, some nets are well known, but there are some secret ones too. So there is no way of guessing just how the men at this meeting were connected. A society involving research into deterrent weapons for the next generation. The Alphabet Project. With those words, it was possible to imagine what that might entail. Deterrent weapons? That usually refers to nuclear technology. Weapons are normally used to destroy enemies. However, the general idea of deterrent weapons is very different. The assumption is that they won't actually be used against anyone. Nuclear weapons are largely used as a threat to prevent enemy invasion, a deterrent, not a use. Both the US and Soviets possess large stockpiles of nuclear arms, keeping each other in check, but they will never actually use them, because if they did, there'd be a nuclear war, and both countries would be destroyed. So they're like a legendary weapon you never draw. Of course, that last resort only works because both sides have nuclear weapons. If one side lacks them, then they lose all military negotiation power. In other words, nations without nukes are powerless before nuclear-armed states. That can't be true. Japan abandoned nukes and it still functions as a nation today. Or so some people may be thinking, but they're wrong. Japan abandoned nukes, but lies under the nuclear umbrella by allying itself with America. That means the nation functions thanks to America's nukes. However, that also means we must resign ourselves to forever being a vassal of America. In order for Japan to escape that and become a powerful nation equal to America, it must possess its own deterrence arms and step out of that nuclear umbrella. That society must have been put together by experts who believe in that ideal. Given that, even the name Alphabet Project makes sense. Nuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction. However, weapons of mass destruction aren't always nuclear. They also include biological weapons and chemical weapons. Atomic, biological, chemical. The initials of these three words make up ABC. That's why weapons of mass destruction are sometimes called ABC weapons. I won't go into weapons of mass destruction that don't belong to those three categories. ABC, alphabet. In other words, Alphabet Project must be a code for research into weapons of mass destruction. As it happened, this guess of Takano's was correct. By rights, Japan should possess nuclear arms. We established ourselves as a peace-loving nation after the war, and after our vast international contributions, we've been recognised as a permanent member of the UN. Yet until we possess nuclear arms, we won't be recognised as a proper nation. That's the long-held desire of post-war Japan. Exactly. However, realistically, thanks to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the major nations hold a monopoly on nukes. Worse, our domestic public opinion is growing allergic to nukes, so foreign and domestic pressures make implementing them impossible. Biological and chemical weapons are sometimes known as the poor man's nuke. Small countries that can't own nuclear weapons have already started research into that kind of weaponry. Takano-san, please don't misunderstand us, okay? The purpose of our research isn't to obtain a biological weapon. Instead, our goal is to prevent such weapons from coming into Japan from other countries. So this is research into self-defense. I want you to understand that. Yes, I'm aware of that. Takano hated this Japanese tendency to make excuses, but she didn't let it show on her face. No matter what they said, they already saw the value in using this research toward biological weaponry. So Higurashi syndrome could be made into like something to make Japan a bit of a powerhouse, I guess. However, in truth, that was just an excuse as well. If they actually wanted to research biological weapons, then it would be much faster to research diseases like smallpox, anthrax, instead of an unidentified disease like Higurashi syndrome. So it wasn't actually correct to say the Defense Agency was interested in it as a biological weapon. In other words, Takano needed a powerful sponsor who could back her up with funding, personnel, and a facility to conduct her research. So she used her connections and turned to the old men behind the government and economy, reaching out to each of them and getting them to forcibly pull funding out of the Defense Agency under the excuse of its application toward biological weaponry. That was the truth. Therefore, her project wasn't officially recognized by the Defense Agency. To be exact, the people who secretly controlled the Defense Agency were the ones who knew about it. These masterminds diverted funding from the Defense Agency to the Alphabet Project, and then they pushed for Takano's research to be a part of it. Takano gets her funding, and the influencers get to drain public funds through kickbacks. Considering that, it was doubtful this project was genuinely about researching the next generation of deterrence arms. It was probably just an excuse for the masterminds to funnel money into their own pockets. Well, those complicated matters didn't matter to Takano. Whatever those old men and influencers were planning wasn't her business. As long as she could get the funding for her research, that was enough. Either way, Takano had found her sponsor. It was one of the biggest organisations around too. This had always been her grandfather's dream. Takano was trying to stay calm, but she was about to jump up and down in excitement. Nakagawa-kun says that once research gets underway, he doesn't mind buying it out. Although it's still incomplete, he definitely sees potential in it. You're absolutely right. This research is only halfway complete. Sufficient funding, facilities and personnel will be indispensable. About that. Here's where the negotiations start, but apparently they wish to take on this research in its entirety. I feel bad saying this, but they think the burden is too much for you to bear alone. Hearing that put quite the damper on Takano's ecstasy. I'm not trying to make money off of this. I'm working as a researcher purely out of intellectual curiosity. All I need is a sponsor, and what they seek are results. That was the relationship I had hoped to establish. Takano realised she was talking rather breathlessly, so she tried to calm herself down. Either way, they'd be backing the research. Considering they're hoping for results that merit the budget, they probably feel that Takano is still too young to handle it. I know, you've been working on this for a long time and you don't want anyone to just grab it from you, right? I totally understand that. Of course, we've already informed them, so here's the compromise we come up with. First, we'll start your research as an offshoot of the Alphabet Project. Once you have the Board of Directors' approval, you'll be given official funding. We'll have you participate in the project as an associate researcher who'll take part in the research that way. If she wanted their funding, she'd have to fall under their authority, of course. So far, she had no objections. However, the Research Society has listed a few conditions in exchange for funding the project. First, as was just mentioned, is to entrust the position of lead researcher to an individual that's skilled and talented in this field of research. I hate to interject, but who would be more knowledgeable about this than me, other than the late Dr. Takano, of course. Now. Please calm down, Takano-san. I understand how you feel. Still, how is this any different from selling my research to this individual? This isn't what we discussed at all. Calm down, Takano-san. Those cunning old men didn't miss sight of the faint leak of anger that crossed Takano's expression. They gave evasive laughs, as if remarking how immature she still was if she let her emotions show over such a little thing. However, they weren't laughing to look down on Takano. On the contrary, they were trying to tell her to wait until the end. Of course, we'll make sure you get your way. Koizumi-sensei told me to take good care of you. Do you think I would just ignore you after you told me that? Don't worry. Please let me work things out. I'll make sure you'll be happy. What do you mean? You see, I get to select the person in charge. Everyone chortled except Takano. After a moment, she joined in. In other words, he meant that he would find just the right person. The defense agency had suggested finding an expert to lead the project because they didn't feel comfortable with just Takano. However, Takano's sponsor was the one tasked to find such a person. In that moment, Takano realised it. How wonderful it is to have such a powerful backer. Let me work it out. I'll find some candidates for you. All you have to do is pick the one you think would be the most suitable. Takano felt better after hearing that. While she wouldn't be the official head of the project, she would end up leading it from the shadows. Of course, she wasn't an expert per se. Having a partner would actually be beneficial. Give me some time to talk to the other end. I'll make sure you'll be happy with the outcome. Please just be patient for a while. I understand. Thank you for everything. Oh, by the way, it's not just the defense agency. Nagata-kun from the Ministry of Health and Welfare is willing to help you too. He introduced me to Itu-kun from the National Institute of Infectious Diseases. He's willing to help you with equipment and other technology. Really? Thank you so much. This is a national project, isn't it? Congratulations, Takano-san. This is all because of your effort and the deceased Dr. Takano's hard work. Oh no, this is all because of Dr. Takano. I haven't done anything yet. Being humble is a good virtue. Just like Koizumi-sensei told me, you truly are a nice person, aren't you? No wonder he adores you. Anyway, they want you to join the defense agency. Luckily, you have a doctor's license, right? We'll secure your position as a medical doctor of the TRDI. Do you mean I'll be a public servant? I wasn't expecting that. All the organisations that are involved with the Alphabet Project are public institutions. The SDF is actually interested in this research as well, and they're making strong requests to dispatch some of their personnel too. So depending on the circumstances, you may be treated as an SDF member. Well, just think of those matters as officials squabbling over jurisdiction. So to stand above those officials, you need your own official position. No matter what, we'll make sure you'll be happy, so please don't worry about anything. I understand. I'll let you work things out. But knowing Dr. Takano's research was only rejected by the old Japanese military, it's hard to believe that the Self-Defense Force is interested in it now. Well, that couldn't be stopped. With the war situation worsening, the Japanese military sought something with immediate effect, something that could turn the war around. I don't think they were looking down on Dr. Takano's research. That wasn't true, of course. Takano already heard that confession from the old man. She exhaled. To her, it was like the meeting in front of her was happening somewhere far away. She had longed for this day to come, and worked so hard to reach it. Finally, her grandfather and his research were attaining recognition. This was the day she had dreamed of, so she was frightened just imagining that it might be an actual dream. True joy can't be felt all at once. Oftentimes, it's a delayed reaction. Takano thought that must be exactly what she was feeling. I imagine you'll probably be given a field officer's rank. Since you'll be second in command, you'll likely be a major. That's wonderful. Major Takano, huh? I'm a little jealous. As a man, I wish I had a rank like that. Boy, oh boy, Major Takano, huh? A major? What's that signify? It's reasonably high in the rank system of the Self-Defense Forces. It's like a sub-manager at a company, I guess. That will be your rank once the project gets underway. It's equivalent to a lieutenant commander in the old Japanese military. What a coincidence! Dr. Takano was also a lieutenant commander in the old military. Takano remembered suddenly. They were right. Her grandfather had been a lieutenant commander in the Japanese military. Everything she had done until today was so she could continue her grandfather's research. Now everything had fallen into place. She had even been granted the same rank as her grandfather. She had always believed that succeeding in his research would be proof that they had a bond tighter than blood. And now she would even be the same rank as him. This is fate, Takano thought. Maybe this is even a message from Grandpa? Yes, it must have been a shout of encouragement from heaven. It was proof that she inherited not only his research but his will as well. Takano couldn't help but feel a sense of destiny for attaining the rank of major. Let me have a drink. Grandpa, I'm finally here. Nobody else could hear her say that, but her grandfather in heaven could. That's what Takano believed. She had only come so far. There was still a lot of things to do for this research to be recognized as a great work. Otherwise, her grandfather wouldn't become a god. She wouldn't become one either. You must become a god. That was in her grandfather's will. I was unable to do so. That line preceded it. It was her grandfather's dying wish. Her grandfather entrusted it to her. All of his research. A god can't be physically brought back to life. A god is made in the hearts of the people who remain alive. Her grandfather will live on in her heart. His exploits will be known to many, and all the scholars will fight to read his documents, to steal them from each other. And they will learn about Hifumi Takano, who began his research during the war. They will know that nobody understood him, and that he ended up devoting his lonely life to his research. And finally, they will extol his grand achievement. There we have it. The sort of reasoning behind why Miyo Takano was trying to research Hinamizawa syndrome. We know how batshit insane she'd go sometimes, but that was the whole chapter in one go as well. Is every chapter going to be like this? No tips again. Oh wow, it's a very different sort of arc, isn't it? So far we're just seeing like Miyo's background, her history, her reasoning, giving a bit of empathy. I think it's a good start. I do find politics and sort of war-based stories a little bit bland and boring myself, but I think it's necessary to understand Miyo. So, this has been Greeny XI. I hope you've enjoyed this chapter. I'll see you again in a bit. I don't know how the game's going to carry on with the story, but thanks again for watching, folks. I'll see you again in a bit.